Hello, this is the Net Hero podcast. I'm Sumit Bose, and this podcast is all about business and doing better for the planet. It's not an eco podcast, we're not green warriors. We believe that business is good and business will make the difference, but it's about holding businesses to account. So if you're interested in what we're doing to try and make things better, to stop our polluting of the planet, to stop our global warming, to stop us driving around in cars that are polluting the air that we breathe, this is the podcast for you. It's all about business, it's about invention, it's about entrepreneurs, scientists, and frankly, there's a few wild cards as well. Do hope you enjoy listening to this episode, and make sure you subscribe and follow us on your social media platforms. And please check out our two news websites, energylivenews.com and Future Net Zero. On with the show. Sometimes, a bit like Christmas, things are so good you want it to happen twice. And I'm delighted to say I've got the main man, Mr. American Science, Dr. Frederic B. Bertley, back on the podcast. Dr. B, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. Now, last time we talked about what COSI, your center, let me try and get the name of the institution right. The Center of Science and Industry in Columbus, Ohio, correct?
That's correct. Now, we do pronounce it COSI.
COSI, not COSI.
Because in the U.S., there is a salad and sandwich shop that has proliferated throughout the country, and they're called COSI. So we don't sell salad. We do have salads and sandwiches in our cafe, but we like to distinguish ourselves. So yes, pronounced COSI, but you're right, Center of Science and Industry.
Today, we're going to talk about something that I think people have been noticing, which is you've had it, obviously, in America this fall, autumn, as we call it. We had it this summer, where there's been exceptional heat right across Europe, right across the UK. And I was saying this before we started, that weird things are happening. So my plants that normally flower in the summer, they flowered in kind of April, May as normal, and then they died. And suddenly we had more warmth and they flowered again in September. You've had changing weather. I know it's snowing right now where you are today, but you had changing weather for the whole of October across the States. Mm-hmm. You've had very unusual sea temperatures going on. And there's been talk about things happening that might start to disrupt the Gulf Stream. So before we go into exactly what's going on, if you could explain just how complicated the weather systems are, because there's a difference between weather and climate, isn't there? And so many people jump on this is climate change. What for you as a scientist would say this instigates the beginnings of climate change? What sort of frequency of events would you say, something's happening?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I want to pick off where you said things come in twos, right? Yeah, so this is my second interview with you. Well, you had two sets of flowers blooming, apparently. So there you go. The first question is fundamental. Weather versus climate. Weather is all about, do you need an umbrella tomorrow? Are you going to go out shoveling? It's what's happening to you now in your geolocation. Climate is over a long period of time. And so when folks talk about climate change, which is one of the biggest problems, frankly, with science communication, so people talk about climate change, you're talking about anywhere from decades to centuries to, thousands of years. And we as humans who live on average to 80 years old have a tough time adapting to that. So a lot of times people confuse weather and climate, but they are two different things. With that, the trends are absolutely interesting that in your lifetime and in my lifetime, we probably didn't have flowers blooming twice a season. It just didn't happen. And now it's clearly happening. So that's indicative of, there's something beyond weather that's happening here. There's this climate shift. In the US, we have incredibly dry spaces out in the West. And so we have uncharacteristic numbers of forest fires that we didn't have 20, 30, 50 years ago. That's because it's drier in the West. And you talked about in the US this year, in our autumn season, was uncharacteristically warm. Not just the US, but up into Canada, they also had similar phenomena that you saw where things were rebudding or reblooming. And it has a massive downstream consequence because then you got flowers. Flowers have pollen. Then there's bees, and the bees are impacting. So it goes from, temperature to impacting, forestry and vegetation. But that also impacts animal life, et cetera. So long cascading tail. But in short, these things are indicative of climate change versus just a different weather pattern?
So you look at it, we're about the same age. You're a younger man than me. But we look back, right, to the 70s and 80s. And, I don't know where it was like where you grew up, but I grew up in London and we'd have cold winters, right? And we'd have fairly miserable summers as natural, but you get some sun. You notice for sure, I remember the Mediterranean, I started going properly, probably 1990s. I was doing 35 years. I've seen it get hotter. I've seen it get hotter in the last 10 years. I was in California a few years ago after those devastating fires. You're getting them every season now, like you say. Is there something happening which is, people call it, I think you call it drift, seasonal drift, where things are sort of merging? We're getting kind of not as cold, but wetter, and then it's getting drier longer, or it's not kind of, the leaves aren't falling. Are you seeing, as a scientist, some of this happening? And is it just happening in certain parts of the world, or is it happening everywhere?
So overall, there's change everywhere, but the
Right.
amount of change that's measured can be localized to things that may be happening closer to the equator or closer to the Arctic, et cetera. But overall, the planet's without question being impacted. In terms of seeing differences then versus now, and you talked about we were from London. I was raised in Montreal, Canada, and I can remember, albeit I'm still short now, but I can remember as a kid, the snowdrifts were above my head. And the last decade, sure, of course, we get snowfalls in Canada and a couple of bad storms here and there, but not nearly as much snowfall and accumulations we've had in years past. And so what's happening? The most important thing to understand is those flowers that are blooming secondarily, that reduction in cool fall temperature, those things are just litmuses, if I can invent a plural. I don't know if it's litmus. I don't know. They are just an indication, a marker of something else happening, right? And what is happening are two fundamental things, really one fundamental thing. It is from the industrial, revolution period, late 1800s into early 1900s to today, a significant increase in CO2. That literally causes all these other things, which then collectively lead to, oh, wow, I have a second batch of flowers. Oh my gosh, it's in September in London and I'm wearing t-shirts and shorts. What's going on? And so those things that people are feeling and noticing, that's end stage. That's just proof definitive that something else is happening. And the question is, what is happening? And we have definitive proof that it's not, to your earlier question, it's absolutely an integrated ecosystem and complicated math and chemistry and bioscience, all these things interplaying, but it's really down to almost one thing: increase in fossil fuels. Just adding more CO2 to the atmosphere impacts the ozone, impacts things like the Gulf Stream and the Jet Stream. It impacts things like ocean temperatures, and all these things in interplay to give us the weather / climate we're feeling now.
What are we going to do about it? Let's put the two things. We'll talk about, because COP's on now when we're recording this, and frankly, I don't hold out much hope. Sorry, I'm a bit cynical on the whole COP thing, but anyway, we all know what we're supposed to do, right? We all know how we're supposed to go. But let's just park that for a second. There's another phrase that's coming out, which is called mitigation or adjusting or whatever you want to call it, right? So for now, if these changes happen, if we get this seasonal drift and things like that, what would you see affecting us? How would it affect, for example, agriculture or energy demand or, the way kind of we sort of, I don't know, the way we move around, suddenly, in my wife's family from Italy in the summer, it's ridiculously hot now, right? And it's affecting economies because people can't go out on the beach because it's 40 degrees. That's stupid. So in terms of these sort of change indicators, as you call them, how are we going to have to adapt?
Well, first of all, you use the term we, and I just need to be clear here. And by the way, I'm a hopeful optimist. However, as Andrew Marvell says in his great, sonnet, at my back, I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near. As I get older with time, I become closer to you, a little more cynical. My optimism tends to fade. With that said, we use the term we. There are 8 billion people on the planet, right? Well, the fact of the matter is, it's not the royal we. It's not all 8 billion people. So when you talk about what are we going to do about it, The fact of the matter is, you and I as individuals can put these slow flow through shower heads, can reduce how much we're driving with gasoline, and we can do all these as individuals. And I want to be clear, as individuals, if we get all 8 billion to do little changes, okay, but that is literally a pebble
Of
in
course.
the pond. So when we talk about what can we do, unless the 90% of the folks that are producing fossil fuels, and by the way, I have a car, I have things that are made possible because of fossil fuels, so I'm not pretending that I'm not benefiting from industrialization. But the fact of the matter is, these big companies that are cranking this stuff out of there, they're the ones that are going to have to peel that back. Now, I'm all about making money. My whole my pulpit is, instead of making $10 billion, can you make $9.5 billion and save the planet? Right. So when we talk about what can we do, that's the we that needs to change that behavior. And here's the thing. This is where I do get cynical, because with the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s and early 1900s, we didn't know that, oh my gosh, burning this stuff is going to release CO2, and
Yeah,
CO2
yeah,
is going to have
yeah.
this. We didn't know. We started figuring out in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and now it's like, okay, we got enough data, everything from the ice cores to what we measure. We now know. Well, what's happening? You talked about energy demands. What's happening today? The biggest thing that's happening to humanity today is this field called AI.
Yeah, of
It's
course.
real. The
Yep.
train has left the station. It's happening. But unlike late 1800s, early 1900s, when we didn't know, Dr. B, because I always call you the other Dr. B, Dr. B, we know today that AI, to achieve all this stuff we're talking about, artificial general intelligence and super intelligence, the energy requirements are not 10x.
No, I
They're not
know.
100x.
I
They're
know.
not even 1000x. In some cases, they're 10,000x plus. The amount of energy is required, we literally don't have that. So people are looking at nuclear, all kinds of stuff. That is going to have an environmental impact, clearly. The amount of water that's needed to cool these super processors and these sort of is astronomical. So I'm saying, when you talk about, what can we do and how are we going to work? We're trying to stop or figure out the last climate change, and we're about to do something over the next 10 to 20 years that's going to literally dwarf the impact of what climate change has done now over the last 100 years. So I still remain a hopeful optimist, but I don't see enough of the conversation with something like AI, where they're worried about security and safety and all that, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
important.
yeah.
And people have mentioned the impact on the environment, but there's not much being done to thwart that. So, where do we land? I'm
Mm.
hopeful, but if I'm a practical person, or more importantly, if I'm a scientist and I deal with data, our success trend monitoring human behavior, and especially the bigger conglomerates that are really precipitating the mass of this, aren't changing significantly in the kind of current climate science. And the big powerhouse that AI, I mean, we've never seen funding like we're talking about. It's
No, I
just
know.
the biggest thing in humanity, and it's going to have a massive impact on the environment, and that's not happening. So I don't know. I'm always looking for a silver lining. I'm always hoping that we will get it. But if I am a betting individual and relying on data, it's going to be pretty tough, sir.
That is quite terrifying if you think about it, that we haven't sorted our shit out, frankly, for the last 100 years. And like you say, we're going to scale up so quickly. I saw recently there was the new robot from Elon Musk, and it looks cool and all of that, but God knows how much that would cost to power and generate. You're looking at kind of everything, every tool will have AI and all of that. I mean, there is the other side of it, which you could say is, well, frankly, does anyone really give a damn anymore? Because if we really did give a damn, we would stop, or we would say, right, we're going to consume less. And although people are changing a bit of their behavior, that isn't happening really fast enough either. So, in terms of this adaptation here in the UK, lots of talk about kind of more flood defences and things like that. But this is all economic in a world that's squeezed, even though there is a lot of money out there. So, are we just, I hate to say it, but we seem to be in a bit of a doom loop where we're just going round and round, where even we're trying to do, like we're putting little fingers in the dam and there's another leak coming here and there. Do you have much hope that perhaps, like as they said in The Martian, we can science the shit out of this and get ourselves out of it somewhere? Could there be a way that we can use the AI to help us?
Bingo. You just hit the nail on the head. There is, in my opinion, enough critical mass of scientists
Yeah,
and laypersons that, to quote you, do give a shit.
yeah,
And I think now, today, unlike 10 years ago, definitely 20 years ago, this AI, capacity does allow potential solutions that we haven't figured out. So right now we talk
yeah,
about, okay, you always hear it, by 2030, we need to cut X. By
yeah, yeah,
2050,
yeah.
we need to cut it. And there's that tipping point, and oh my gosh, if we don't do it, that's fine. That's based on us doing the best analyses as we can, et cetera, et cetera. But now you're taking this AI processing that, essentially is the entirety of human intelligence that's been recorded with infinite amount of processing speed. It might spit out under the
Yeah.
right guidance some really, to your point, some really elegant solutions that
Yeah.
are achievable. And that's where I hang my hat. And that's also I hang my hat there for diseases, right? The
Yeah.
capacity to cure diseases and all these other things. Using AI in a proper way with the right people behind it might bring out some really good solutions to a lot of our problems, including climate science. Short of that, your guess is as good as mine, sir.
It's time to pack up and head to Mars. I mean, I look at it and I do think, you can get doomed, and I think young people particularly, they can become, so stressed by this stuff.
Yep.
The fact is, the planet itself won't die. Right? So, the planet has been damn hotter and damn colder,
Yep.
full Earth and all these things. So, do you think we'll just have to end up with more of this human adaptation happening, probably faster? But then that brings the question of there's two types of humans on the planet, those with and those without. So, how are you going to help the people that are in those places, which are probably more vulnerable and they ain't got much money?
Well, it's funny you say that. There's going to be a third class of humanoid type species, and that's the AI pieces. We are at the very nascent stage, even though we've moved on far, at the nascent stage of what these bots will look like. Like Elon Musk launches. I mean, people don't even talk. China is so far
Oh,
advanced. We have
incredible.
300 million people, 330 million, 350 million people in the U.S. They have 1.7 billion people. So take
Yeah.
the number of engineers, number of computer scientists, number of geniuses, right? And they're completely crushing
Oh,
the sky space.
I got to tell you this story. You like this. My son, my eldest son, sorry to interrupt, he was in China for a conference. At
Yep.
the door, he ordered room service. A robot dog thing brought the room service.
There you go. There you go. There you
They are
go.
using technology, and we don't get enough people from China coming on, but I'd love to. But this is the thing, isn't it? We've got parts of the world that are just pushing this so fast.
Yep. Yep. And we're going to have species that will look like you. They have already, in the bioengineering, they've engineered skin that looks and feels like your skin. So now you can have this
Arnie
robot
is coming.
oh, absolutely. And so the question is, yes, the planet will survive. You talk about a classic clinical case of resilience. Mother Earth is resilient. The planet will be here. Well, I mean, once there's a supernova, that'll change everything. But outside of a supernova, the planet will be here. And we've seen extinction. We've obviously dinosaurs, but we've also seen extinction of other species. We could be on that, or we are on that list. It depends how fast or slow based on the other things. But now you bring in this human created,
Yeah,
AI
creating a
bot
species.
that
You're right.
looks
Yeah.
creating a species that they'll, by the way, will be able to reproduce, not in our concept of biological sexual reproduction, but they'll just make copies of themselves,
Yeah.
right? Reproduction doesn't matter how you do it, right? Reproduction is reproduction. And so how are we going to fare in that? Because then you got the haves and the have-nots. We're going to get really close together because you got this third-party robots. So it's very interesting. I am concerned with the speed at which we're putting in guardrails and
Yeah.
guidelines and
Yeah.
red buttons or switches that you can pull down and shut things down. I'm
Yeah.
concerned about how fast those are going with the speed of progress on the technological side. But yeah, it's not even about the haves versus have-nots. That's like a 19th century, maybe 20th century. Okay, Civil War. This is T2 and T3. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger coming in a Harley Davidson and changing our world.
Yeah, my God, he'll say "Hasta la baby."
That's right. That's exactly right.
If you look at the stuff that's going on right now with COP, as we're recording this, COP is on, and you don't have India, you don't have America, you don't have China there. You know,
Who are we kidding? You just named the three biggest powerhouses in our accent.
right. So some say it's had its day. I also find it very bizarre that they've built this bloody thing in the middle of a city in the Amazon where they're chopping down. Anyway, we won't go into that. Some have said that copper's lost its way completely and that we're not, whatever people say, you have to bring the economics of it into it. So this is what Trump's trying to do. This is what Xi's trying to do. This is what Modi, it doesn't matter who they are. They are, for whatever you may think, trying to do their own thing for their own people. Does it need to be completely changed in its ethos? And maybe instead of a government thing, it becomes a business thing. Because if you just said what you said about the corporations, they're the only ones, because they're multinational, that can actually pull the real levers.
You're 100% correct. Look, government means well, governments mean well, but there needs to be a business case because the amount of money is so large. There needs to be a business case for why this matters, and it needs to be run by people who really understand business and economy and economic growth and development. You can have all the goodwill as you want for governments. I mean, and the funny thing to me, and again, being data driven, look at all the COP conferences, look at all the climate science conferences we've had over the last decade.
Yeah, incredible.
What happens every time? They have this conference, all these countries come, they come up with a guideline. Some people listen to it, some people don't. Guess what? Have we moved the needle in the last 25, 30 years of having these conferences? We have not. So you're absolutely right. When we shift from government, let's try to do this because it's best for the planet versus, hey, there's an economic rationale for doing this where billionaire X and billionaire Y are going to feel it. You have a chance at getting a different way to move forward. And so I'm with you 100%.
The young kids that come to COSI, not COSI, to COSI, like I said earlier, you've got to tread a fine line, which is to give them the truth, but not make people feel like the world is doomed. What do you guys try and teach them about climate science? Because they're the future. They're the ones that will make the difference.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question. Our stance is a fewfold. One, science is everywhere and for everyone. So back to your point about socioeconomic status, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, science is part of your world, right? So that's one. So we want to make sure there's enough programs so that everybody has a shot, regardless of socioeconomic status, gender, et cetera, race. We want to make sure people are exposed to it. And then that's people from womb to tomb, everybody. But now when we shrink down and look at kids and the kind of next generation of leaders in high school and in college, et cetera, it's really just giving them as much of a toolkit that allows them to be very Socratic, ask questions, know how to research answers, and most importantly, know how to process the answers they're getting through research. And that's all that we can do. We don't paint rainbows or paint the opposite, gloom and doom. It's, hey, youngster, you can have a role in how the future unfolds, but to have a significant role, you can't be a walking zombie. You have to be able to think critically, process effectively, and form conclusions and be able to make sense of our world. And then it'll be up to that generation to make decisions as they move forward. We don't do the gloom and doom. We do present some realism. It's important. But we don't want to, because when you get that younger generation despondent, that's, then we're really stuck in terms of a human population. If all the young folks throw up their hands and are like, this is crazy.
Before we go, the kind of understanding, which is what underpins what you do in your organization, I think some of that message has been lost, right? We're having a big debate here about trust in the media. I'm sure you've had it in America. And some of that message is lost because there is this thing of this kind of eco-zealousy that's going on. And we touched on the last one. You never win people over with that. So how are we going to, and how do you see the role of places like yours, plus governments, to make sure that we get the public to understand a bit more about this in a way that they feel they're not being lectured to? You talk about, you said all these things haven't moved the dial. You said zip. And I kind of agree with you in the sense that, yes, we probably haven't done as much, but we do have more awareness, right? And most of it here would think about recycling and things like that. But the truth is the public, unless it affects the way we live, whether it's food or how we get about or kind of the cost of things, we don't really take it unless you're in sub-Saharan Africa or you're in the Amazon, you're seeing these trees being chopped down. Those are the people that really see it. But for us, the consumers, what can we do to try and connect more with the public, to try and do the pressure that eventually will affect, we're the eventual kind of customers, right? That affects
Yep.
the shareholders of those people. How
Yep.
do we get that going a bit more, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's so interesting. One, I'm going to swing the pendulum from Andrew Marvell over to another great scholar, Bob Marley, who said, who said, "He who feels it
Yeah,
knows it best."
yeah,
And that's just how we operate, which brings me to then the original Dr. B, my father. He used to tell us as a kid, I didn't really get it, but I get it now as an adult, which is humans aren't logical, they're
mm,
psychological, right? We have emotions, feelings, and all that stuff, right? If we were logical, it'd be like Data or
yeah,
Spock
yeah,
or
yeah.
Star Trek, probably be a whole different system. We're very psychological. And that's all real. Then to the specificity of your question about, well, how do we make sense of the world? How do we, as science communicators, get people to feel comfortable to understand stuff? I hate to say this, I built my whole life in this space, and it's very meaningful to me. And you talked about trust. Science centers have been known to be trusted entities. Universities used to be trusted
Yeah.
entities. Well, you see what's happened in the U.S. We've
Yep.
taken a bath on higher eds in that.
Yep.
But here's the thing: there's this massive confounding technology that we didn't have 10, certainly 20, 30 years ago. It's this thing called AI. And what I'm not just copying out and bringing back AI for the heck of it. It's real in that the amount of information that comes out this AI space, it is becoming harder and harder to differentiate what is fact, what is
Yes,
fiction, what
I
is
agree.
true, what is not true. And I want to be literal and say, even in the research sector. So basic scientists, basic research scientists, whether engineers or life scientists or environmental scientists, you got AI content that's coming out that looks like it's peer reviewed, that seems to make perfect sense, but it's giving a data point or a conclusion that's flawed. And you and I, as scholarly as we may be, we have trouble deciphering it. So throw that hand grenade into the mix of getting people to trust, and it's really problematic because everybody or anybody can find data to back up their opinion.
Match their line. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then how do you decide who's right? And so I just crank up my Bob Marley a little louder, get me a red striped bear, get close to the beach, and keep it moving, Dr. B.
Well, I think that's a good point to end. I think all of us should be playing a bit of Bob just to chill us out. Frederic, thank you so much again for coming on. I know you're a busy man. Really appreciate the time you give to us, and I know the audience loves it. So thanks very much for coming on again.
You got it. And real quick, just to end on a really positive note, what you're doing is critical. You all and people who are capturing stories, capturing news, sharing out stuff with quote unquote experts is critical. So thank you for what you're
No, no,
doing
we
to give us a
try.
shot, to give us a shot.
I'm sure social media hates me, but we try anyway. Thank you very much for your time. He's a great man. Check out COSI, COSI, and have a look at what they're doing. Comment as usual on the normal social media channels. Let us know what you think. Thanks to Sohi for production this week. I'll see you on the next episode of the Net Hero podcast. Dr. B, I need you to get the Americans subscribing. We need more viewers.
You got it. I will work on it. I will do my part.
Good man.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from FutureNetZero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. FutureNetZero.com. Better business, better planet.